Okay, you know those days, right? Where just one little thing, like your hair, decides it's just not going to cooperate? It feels kind of silly, but what if I told you that feeling is actually a trigger for a whole cascade of psychological effects that can totally derail your day? Well, let's dive into the surprising psychology behind the bad hair day.
We've all been there. You look in the mirror and something's just off. And that one tiny thing seems to cast this huge shadow over your entire day, right? It makes you feel kind of irritable, out of sorts, and just not yourself.
But what if it's not just a mood thing? What if it's deeper? Well, research is telling us that feeling is actually a signal of a much bigger process going on in your brain. One that can mess with your confidence, your social life, and believe it or not, even how smart you feel. So, to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to look at this fascinating study from Yale University. The researchers there, they wanted to know what actually happens inside our minds when we think our hair looks bad. And what they found was this kind of three-part punch. First off, it lowers what's called performance self-esteem. That's basically your belief in your own ability to get stuff done. Second, it cranks up social anxiety, making you feel way more self-conscious. And third, it turns up the volume on your inner critic, making a small hair issue feel like a major personal failing. Now, here's the part that's really wild. The study found that you don't even have to actually be having a bad hair day. Nope, just thinking about a time you had one was enough to make people feel less intelligent and less capable. Nothing about their actual skills changed, just how they saw themselves. Okay, so that's the what. We know what happens. But the big question is why? Why does our brain have such a strong reaction to something that seems so small? Well, the answer seems to lie in two really powerful psychological theories.
So the first one is called self-objectification theory. Think of your brain's processing power kind of like your computer's RAM. When you get hyper-focused on how you look, you're using a huge chunk of that mental energy to constantly monitor your own appearance. And that's all energy you can't use for other things, like solving a problem or just being present in a conversation.
The second piece of the puzzle is this idea called the looking glass self. This theory basically says we often see ourselves not as we really are, but as we imagine other people see us. So when you see a flaw in the mirror, you project that negative judgment onto everybody else, assuming they're all noticing and judging you for it too. So you put those two ideas together, and you can see how this nasty little cycle gets started. We start watching ourselves because of self-objectification. Then the looking glass self kicks in, and we assume everyone else thinks we look bad. And because all our brain power is tied up in this loop, our actual performance starts to dip, which just makes us feel like our initial fears were right all along. Now, it's really important to remember that this whole internal cycle doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It gets cranked up to 11 by some pretty intense external pressures. I mean, appearances always mattered to people, but the kind of pressure we're under today has changed a lot. You can really see this shift when you look at the past versus today. Historically, beauty standards were set by your local community. It was about showing your status or that you were clean. The pressure was there, sure, but it wasn't constant. But now, with social media, we're hit with this global, algorithmically perfected standard. Our appearance has become this nonstop performance, and the pressure is just always on. And all this pressure feeds right into something sociologists call lookism, which is basically prejudice based on how someone looks. And honestly, when this runs wild, we all lose. You get people with brilliant ideas who stay quiet in meetings, really capable leaders who might shy away from big opportunities, all because they're stuck in that self-doubt cycle. Their potential gets buried, and that's a loss for everyone. All right, so knowing all of that, what do we do about it? How do we actually break this cycle? How do we move past the mirror and get that mental energy back for the things that really matter? Well, here's the really good news. It turns out that looking glass self we talked about, it has a major flaw. Psychological research shows again and again that we are terrible at guessing how much other people notice us. That little thing you're obsessing over, yeah, most people will never even see it. Your brain is a way, way harsher critic than anyone else around you. So the next time you feel that confidence crash coming on, you can try this simple 3-step reframe. First, just acknowledge the feeling. Say to yourself, okay, I'm feeling really self-conscious right now. Second, actively separate that feeling from your actual worth. Remind yourself, my hair doesn't determine how smart or capable I am. And third, consciously shift your focus back to your goals for the day. What you want to do, not how you look.
And ultimately, all of this kind of brings us to a much bigger question. Realizing that a bad hair day is just a psychological trigger and not a real measure of our value, that's incredibly freeing. It lets us stop wasting so much energy monitoring our reflection and start focusing on our actions, our ideas, our contributions. So, if our value isn't in our reflection, then where do we truly find it? That's something worth thinking about long after you've stepped away from the mirror.